Hello, hidden gems. Oh, look at that. That's why I always look down when I'm saying hello, because look at that. It's not on the right mic. There we go. David, you are not the only man here. Welcome. There's a lot of testosterone in chat, right, guys? Hello, everybody. Where's McSpunky? Where's Monty? It's good to see everyone because it's day 6 of the Kouri Richins trial. Kouri Richins, for those new here, the mother of and children's book author accused of killing her husband with a laced Moscow mule. And we're gathering to talk because there is so much that happened today. So I hope everybody's ready because, whoa, there are Google searches about some wild stuff and text messages. Texts that surprise do not line up with the defense's accidental overdose narrative. Yeah, that's not who these text messages help. They do not help the defense. And we also finally see that OG interview between Robert Crozier and law enforcement. So Robert Crozier, remember the supplier of the pills? He says some pretty different things than what he shared on the stand last week. So we'll get into it. We have a lot to talk about. For those who are new here, I'm Lauren Matthias. This is Hidden True Crime. We are here every single night breaking down these 8-hour trial days because, let's be honest, some of it is really confusing, or it can be for me. Even I have to rewatch things a few times to really understand it. Confusing testimony, so many sidebars, the technical stuff. We make it digestible here. And honestly, something we can process together too, because here at Hidden True Crime, we hang out, we connect dots, don't we? Even dots maybe sometimes we shouldn't connect. We still try it. Let's give it a whirl. And we count corrects, or corrects, as we call them here. And yes, corrects is how they say it at the Kouri Richins trial. And the last week's official correct count, are you ready for this? 1,295 corrects. Today's count was 148. And the total amount of sidebars today, 6, which makes the total amount of sidebars thus far in this entire trial 43. That poor jury. They are hanging in there. And a big thank you to one of our trial moderators, Mrs. Martin, for keeping tally. And a big thank you to all of our moderators that make these lives and the live streams possible, because we're also live streaming this in chat during the day. So if you're new here, hit subscribe, hit notifications, turn those on because we are not missing a minute of this trial. And tonight, the defense narrative. And I guess today, Today, the defense narrative got seriously challenged. The gallery did look pretty full this morning, I'll say, too. I'm not totally surprised. In my experience, Mondays are always, I've noticed in high profile cases like this, pretty busy. But one person who wasn't there was that trial attendee that was sketching the jury. Yeah, she wasn't there. She was kicked out last week after a juror wrote a note outing her. And our friend Kathy from Gossip, Rumor, and Innuendo, she actually interviewed a trial insider who saw the whole thing, saw it, and tells Kathy more about that in an interview you can watch over there. She tells Kathy what she was drawing, like the literal numbers and the jurors. And to be clear, no one is to ever sketch a jury. Sketch artists are never allowed to sketch a jury or juror. So yeah, it was fascinating to learn more over there at Gossip, Rumor, and Innuendo. So go check it out there. Anyway, back to day 6. Things started a little tense this morning, and before the jury even heard from the next witness, there were a few already legal issues to go over. Defense attorney Ramos told the judge his team hasn't been able to consult with Dr. Eric Christensen, who the state planned to call today and did call. According to Ramos, they've tried to reach him and never got a response. So Judge Mrazek stepped in and said that they could shuffle the order of the witnesses to give the defense time to speak with him. Then defense attorney Lewis objected to another planned witness, Lieutenant Davis, and she argued that the state added him to the list late last week and didn't give enough notice. One second, I can grab a glass of water. If you're new here, I also have a cough. Don't ever count it like we do corrects, please. My little coffee cough. It's nerves. And yeah, not that I shouldn't be completely okay going live with all of you by now, but here I am. So thank you for understanding. I'll mute when needed. Okay. So back to these legal issues about the defense not being able to talk to the possible witnesses that the prosecution's calling. Prosecutor Bloodworth pushed back, saying Davis was just there to authenticate a video. So in other words, this is not going to be a dramatic witness, but it's a procedure witness, an important procedural witness, right? And speaking of that video, yeah, that video is important because the two sides also argued over the transcript of that video. Razik told the state that they needed to provide a version with a running transcript for the defense. And that video, along with Dr. Christensen, was supposed to start off the morning, but instead, surprise, court went into recess while everything was sorted out. And when court came back, the state called, finally, Dr. Eric Christensen to the stand. So they got it worked out. Here he is. Dr. Eric Christensen is important. He served as Utah's chief medical examiner from 2016 until just recently retiring. So he is the medical examiner. He also supervised Dr. Ulmer, who signed Eric Richins' death certificate. And for those of us here that followed the Lori and Chad Daybell trials, Dr. Christensen's testimony about Tammy Daybell's autopsy will be remembered as absolutely heartbreaking. It was Dr. Christensen. He is the one who did Tammy Daybell's autopsy after her body was exhumed from the Springville Cemetery. So again, while Tammy Daybell died in Idaho, and they didn't, unfortunately, do an autopsy there, remember, she was buried in Springville Cemetery in Utah. Thus, the Utah medical examiner took over, and that was Dr. Eric Christensen. So anyway, and he testified, by the way, he was the testimony that stated that Tammy Daybell died by homicide by asphyxiation. So justice was served for Tammy. And here he is now back on the stand again for another spouse accused of killing their spouse. I can't imagine his work. So Dr. Christensen testified that he's an expert in forensic pathology, and he walked the jury through how medical examiners determine cause and manner of death. And he said Eric Richins' manner of death was ruled undetermined at the time. They didn't know whether Eric overdosed on his own or if someone administered the drug. So in other words, he knew how he died, right? It was a fentanyl overdose. The manner of death is whether it was a homicide or accidental, and that was ruled undetermined. They didn't know, again, did he overdose or did someone administer this drug? He then explained how fentanyl works in the body. It can be injected, swallowed, inhaled, or otherwise ingested. And once it hits the bloodstream, it affects thinking, it causes drowsiness, and most critically slows breathing. That's what makes it lethal. He said fentanyl is about 100 times more potent than morphine. I didn't even know that. That's incredible. And Christensen testified there's suggestive evidence that Eric ingested the fentanyl orally, but there's no definitive way to prove that. However, there's always a however, there were no injection sites on Eric's body. And in cases where someone smokes fentanyl, you might see burns on fingers or drug paraphernalia nearby. And none of that was present in this case. So again, well, he can't say it was orally taken. We can say what it probably wasn't and then equate that it was likely oral. Then the jury heard a recorded phone call between Christensen and Kouri Richins. And then on the call, Kouri asked several questions about the substances found in Eric's system. Christensen told her that Eric could have taken the fentanyl orally or by injection, and that people can die from even just half the amount that was found in his blood, in Eric's blood. Kouri also asked about Seroquel, an antipsychotic medication found in Eric's system, which was really, really interesting because, why was that interesting? Well, it was actually Kouri's prescription. And so she clearly already knew what that medication was, but was kind of acting like that she didn't. I mean, this was a moment. And I don't even know if everybody caught this moment. I was watching the trial going, holy crap, like the Seroquel's hers. That's hers. That's her antipsychotic medication, not his. So let's Go ahead and listen to the call because this was an important moment.
Hey, this is Kouri Richins. Hey, I just have some quick questions for you. I'm just trying to understand the toxicology report, and I promise I won't take up a ton of your time.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
Can you just kind of explain to me, I guess, she was saying that this kind of supplemental report, I guess, was left out of the first autopsy, and so nothing has really changed. Do you have it in front of you?
I do. Yeah, I got the file here.
So can you?
So just so you know, so we issue supplemental reports, like if once the original report's issued, if we do any additional testing, if we do any additional microscopic examination, anything like that, then we include that. You know, we issue a supplemental report to include that additional information. And sometimes it does change the cause or manner, but in this case.
Okay, it was just like extra testing done?
Extra tox testing, yeah. So originally the testing, the only toxicology testing that was done was on blood. And so then this was additional testing on stomach contents.
Okay, and so is there difference in that, I guess?
Well, they just tell you different things in the sense of, it tells you something about what, was it, is it been there a long time? Is this something the person's been using for a long time? Okay. Is it something they ate? Is it something they, injected? Is it, whatever? And there's different things you can learn by looking at different substances. I mean, we fully expected to find it in the stomach. It's just a question of what was there.
So does does this tell you like if it was like injected, if he ate it, is that what this, can you tell from this report?
Not definitively. I mean, it seems like, with what the amount that's there, that it probably was ingested. Probably taken by mouth.
Okay, and so so the 15 ng, like, is that like a substantial amount? Is that like a trace?
That's a lot of fentanyl in the blood, yeah. And that's, people die with half that amount or less in their system.
Okay, so that's quite a bit.
Yeah.
So yeah. What's the next one down, the norfentanyl?
It's a metabolite of fentanyl. It's what your body changes fentanyl into after you take it.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay. And then, sorry, just the third one, the acetyl. I don't know how you say that.
Acetyl fentanyl.
Oh.
Yeah, that's just it's a form of, it's a variant of fentanyl that is usually only present in the setting of illicitly manufactured fentanyl.
Illicit manufactured, like a pharmacy?
No. A lot of most fentanyl that we see that ends up leading people to die these days is related to fentanyl that's manufactured by drug cartels as opposed to by pharmaceutical companies.
Oh, good Lord! So this is like more of like a cartel. No, I mean that's not what it is.
You call this the street fentanyl as opposed to
prescription.
Fentanyl.
Okay, I see. And then is the ethanol, is that alcohol?
That's alcohol. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and is that like the 279? Is that kind of like a substantial amount, or is that like one drink? Is that 5 drinks?
You can't tell how much it is, and in this case, since this testing was sent, quite a long time after the original autopsy, most likely that's related to post-mortem change, but it could be stuff that he drank. There's not really a way to sort that out. It could be related to decomposition of the stomach content, or it could be related to stuff he drank. But either way, in the stomach contents, there's no way to know what that level means in terms of, if that was a blood level, that would be the same as a 0.28, which would be, that person would be pretty substantially intoxicated. But because it's gastric contents, you could in theory pull something out and it would be, 100% ethanol, depending on if they just drank a stomach full of, if they just drank a bunch of Everclear or something else. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't really tell you much about how much they drank or what they drank or anything like that.
I gotcha.
In the stomach, and it's not present in his blood. So
I gotcha. Okay, so it's not present in the blood, just the gastric or whatever.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then just the last one, what is quetiapine? Quetiapine?
Quetiapine is an antipsychotic medication. It's called Seroquel.
Okay. I
Um,
gotcha.
It's a prescription mental health medication that's prescribed for different things.
I gotcha, okay. And it has like 16,000?
16,000 nanograms per milliliter. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and is that, I mean, quite a bit, like,
It
could
doesn't-
that,
Yeah, I mean, that's a big number, but it doesn't really mean that much. You know, a nanogram is a millionth of a gram, and a gram is not very big. So even 16,000 of them is not a huge amount.
okay. Is there like, could those have been mixed, or is that not kind of a,
But that could what be mixed?
quetiapine and like the fentanyl? Or is that like a normal, I guess, drug thing? I don't know, like,
It's not. Most of the time, if we see those together, it's because somebody was taking quetiapine as a prescribed medication and they were abusing fentanyl. But there's,
okay.
do you have any indication he was abusing fentanyl?
No, that's why all of this is just like, what the heck is this and going on? So I guess that's why I'm confused just about all of this, honestly. So I don't know. So, I know it doesn't mean anything now, but just kind of something for me to, try and figure out, I guess.
Yeah.
And then I'm assuming the acetopin, is that like a aspirin or something?
Acetaminophen, that's just
Oh.
Tylenol. Yeah.
Oh, that's fentanyl too?
No, that's Tylenol.
Oh, Tylenol. I was like, holy shit. Okay.
Yeah.
So just like Tylenol, caffeine, and then the naloxone, I'm assuming is just something that they gave him while he was here.
Probably would be my guess. It'd be, somebody that's unresponsive. It's a very common thing for EMS to give people.
Okay. Okay. No, that works. So I was just trying to figure out, if this is anything different, if we found out anything new with the stuff.
Oh, come on.
Pause there. It's okay. We can fix it. Scott, don't change anything. It seems like if I do this, press play.
Yeah, like she said, it doesn't change anything in the cause or manner of death. It's still, definitely, death from fentanyl intoxication, and we still don't know how he got it into him.
Yeah. And is that anything you could ever find out if it was, do people normally eat that? Like take it, is that something you like shoot?
It's not usually something people eat. Well, that's not even true anymore. So with illicitly manufactured stuff, sometimes people take pills that have that. So yeah, these days you can't really tell.
Yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate your time. I do. Thank you very much. And
Yep. If you have other questions, don't hesitate to give me a call.
Okay. Awesome. What was your name?
Dr. Christensen.
Oh, Christensen. Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay.
You're
Bye-bye.
welcome.
No, it's not, Kouri, something that people typically eat. And again, you know exactly what Seroquel is. Interesting, right? We haven't heard a lot from Kouri. It's interesting to hear this. This call fascinated me, really. I don't know. I saw a lot of your thoughts. Yeah, I also got the Lori Vallow nonchalant vibes, right? When Lori Vallow is talking about after her husband, Charles Vallow, was shot and killed, and she's like, "Hi, neighbors," is sort of that same kind of vibe, right? It's not really a grieving widow, is it? And someone pointed that out. Look, this trial is about doubt, is there enough reasonable doubt for the jury to say, we don't know for sure that Kouri is guilty of this? And as someone in chat said, I don't know if I like our live feed chat. They're like, it seems like everybody here feels like Kouri Richins is guilty. And I said in response to that, that's fair. But when somebody isn't sounding like, one thing that Kouri Richins is guilty of, in my opinion, is not reading the room and not acting like a grieving widow at all. And I would say she's certainly guilty of being cold. after her husband dies. And I don't think that's going to bode well with the jury in this case. All right. It was a fascinating moment. I also want to point out why I am coughing. Grayson said to just tell all of you, but I have multiple sclerosis and I've been to a neurologist recently, and they've chalked it up to likely a symptom that my nerves get inflamed when I go live. So all of you guys make me nervous. My hidden gems make me nervous. No, and you shouldn't, because it's like hanging out with friends. But yeah, these live streams, I guess, stress me out. So I just need to start doing some yoga poses before going live and having more time. But unfortunately, I can't really do that because we're like watching this like 8-hour, getting this recap ready. And then it's like, go, 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 go. And we want to hurry. We want to be on time. So that's what's going on. So thank you for your patience while dealing with a symptom. And thank you to my friend Joe, who recommended clove oil that I do occasionally and some other things. So let's keep going. Thank you to our moderators that are here. Good to see you, Troublemaker. Thank you for reminding people to like. So Christensen also testified that over the past 20 years, fentanyl deaths have risen dramatically. This is an interesting thing to testify about. I think, initially most deaths involve prescription fentanyl used improperly. And then he said that people weren't eating fentanyl until counterfeit street pills became common. In other words, taking it. He explained that counterfeit pills are made to look like legitimate prescriptions, often oxycodone, are largely fentanyl. And that's what we all Googled together last week, right? We were trying to process if it was oxycodone that was sold, why was fentanyl there? Well, they sometimes are made to look like oxycodone, but are largely fentanyl. He told the jury that there was nothing to suggest Eric was a chronic opioid user. Nothing in that autopsy, nothing he saw. He also addressed pseudo-allergic reactions to opioids, explaining that while opioids don't cause true allergic responses, some people can have allergy-like symptoms, such as hives. And in Eric's case, there were no hives. And on cross-examination, Ramos highlighted that Christensen received a call from law enforcement the day before speaking with Kouri. That's interesting, right? He also questioned him about allergic type reactions and whether they can change over time. And Christensen said that they can fluctuate or disappear. And then the defense also attempted to ask about pills containing fentanyl traces. Christensen explained how counterfeit pills are pressed to resemble legitimate medications and that fentanyl heavy fake oxycodone pills are common. So overall, this was all very technical, lots of science, lots of medical explanation. Really interesting, though. Can't imagine, again, a medical examiner's job and what they learn. But and underneath it all is the same core question, though, the jury has to ultimately answer. And I think it again, was it an accidental overdose or was it murder? And again, nothing else really matters. Everybody agrees how Eric Richins died. It was a fentanyl overdose. But was it truly accidental or was it murder? And really, all they need is some reasonable doubt. I do think the defense is poking holes in some things, because Ramos then started digging into the postmortem comments and the toxicology results. He asked about the specific numbers tied to Eric's fentanyl level, and Christensen said he doesn't remember the exact numbers off the top of his head. He explained there isn't some universal number where you can say this is fatal and this is not. It varies from person to person. Tolerance and body chemistry play a role. But he also said there is what he described as a fixed fatal threshold. So while there's no one-size-fits-all number, there are ranges that are considered deadly. So Ramos then shifted to what wasn't done. What wasn't done? He asked Christensen about additional testing that could have been performed. This is what the defense always does, right? Well, what wasn't done? What did you miss? Perfect opportunity to throw in reasonable doubt, right? What testing could have been performed? And Christensen said medical examiners typically test blood, not urine, but literature suggests urine testing can provide more insight. And he mentioned eye fluid and liver testing as well, saying those can sometimes help paint a fuller picture. Ramos brought up hair follicle testing, and Christensen explained that hair testing is generally used to evaluate drug use over time, not just what is in someone's system at the moment they died. He admitted hair testing isn't something they typically do in autopsies focused on cause of death because essentially they're tasked with determining what happened at the time, not necessarily a long medical history, right? Then Ramos asked an important question, in my opinion. So if hair follicle testing had been done, would those results have factored into determining the manner of death? And Christensen's answer was yes, it would have been part of the overall analysis. And that felt like the defense subtly reinforcing its theme. There could have been more investigation into whether Eric was a long-term user, right? Ramos reminded him that in the recorded phone call, Kouri said she was not aware Eric had been using fentanyl. So at that point, the attorneys approached for a sidebar. Surprise, dun, 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 another sidebar. And then after they returned, Christensen said he was not aware of hair follicle drug testing being part of a typical autopsy process for this purpose. So it's not typical to do such a thing. Then Ramos brought up something he called unusual, though. He said, Christensen, this is unusual. This was, okay, here we go. This is what the defense said. Christensen, they said, received communication from multiple law enforcement officers and was invited to a meeting about the case that included the DEA and prosecutors. Christensen acknowledged that this does happen, but it's not common. And that line of questioning definitely seemed kind of like they were hinting at possible coordination or influence, even if very subtle. Yeah, I mean, that's certainly what I got from it. I wanted to know more. They left me hanging. I'm like, well, tell me what happened at that meeting. But instead, Ramos wrapped up and prosecutor Burmester got up to follow up questions, to redirect. I like prosecutor Burmester. Christensen clarified while the prosecutor questioned him that the meeting was an online video call and said he doesn't remember exactly who attended. Okay, so we're getting more info about the meeting. It was a video. And it happened the day before Kouri called him, just the day before. And he also testified that there were no other illicit drugs found in Eric's blood besides fentanyl. And he reiterated, there's no definitive way to know whether Eric was a longtime fentanyl user. And with that, Christensen was released. The jury took a short restroom break, but the parties had to sort a few things out, surprise, and the attorneys began arguing about a May 4th, 2020 interview. The defense objected to playing a video. We know do you guys remember May 4th, 2020? It's a big interview, the OG interview with Robert, Robbie, pill supplier, and law enforcement. So the defense, they objected to playing this video. Of course, they would object because it's a good one. It's a really good one. So they objected to playing this video, arguing it was hearsay between law enforcement officers and Robert Crozier. And they also said they didn't have a chance to question Robert about this particular video, which is strange. Really, they didn't. I am surprised by that. They really didn't have an opportunity or chance to question Robert about this particular video. Well, Judge Mrazek ruled they could have further discussion about admitting Crozier's side of the conversation. He said he would instruct jurors that they are only to consider law enforcement's statements for context, not for the truth of what the officers are saying. Okay, makes sense, but good luck, jurors, doing that. But I agree. Don't just, it's context for the responses of Robert. Bloodworth then asked for 5 minutes before playing the recording of that May 4th interview. The judge said Crozier can be recalled for further testimony about this and be questioned about this video and this interview, even though he had already been released from his subpoena, which makes it a little complicated, but he can be re-questioned or questioned again about it. Court then took a 10-minute break. Like seriously, we're at the edge of our seats. We're like, okay, we're going to hear it. We're going to hear it. We're going to hear it. 10-minute break. Come back. The state then played, though, the recording of Robert being interviewed by law enforcement. And Judge Mrazek instructed the jury that only Crozier's statements can be considered for their truth during deliberations. And in the recording, Sergeant Todd Davis tells Crozier, who was in custody at the time, that they want to discuss a transaction he had made about a year earlier at a Maverick gas station in Draper. For those of you who have been following this, yes, we've heard Carmen testify to this. We heard Robert testify to this. And Davis says Crozier sold blues to Carmen Lauber and that someone died as a result. So that's what police say. And Davis told Crozier that officers had already spoken to Lauber, Carmen Lauber, that's Carmen, and Nicole, and downloaded their phone records. And Robert Crozier says that he knew who Nicole was, according to Davis. That Nicole messaged Carmen Lauber in February, a year before the recording, telling her that she could buy blues from Crozier. And then Robert Crozier, he says he didn't know anyone had died from the drugs. He admitted talking to Carmen Lauber a few times and estimated that she paid him around $500 to $600. He claimed he lost the phone he used to communicate with her. He said Lauber told him the blues were for a friend who wanted them. Crozier described Lauber as being with an older man in his 60s. He thought they were in a white truck the first time they met. He said she bought from him a second time as well, though he didn't remember how much that purchase was. He insisted he only spoke with her twice. He also mentioned he knows Nicole through a man named Cam. So let's listen to this recording because honestly, okay, so if you can recall, Robert said he was detoxing in this interview, right? When Robert was on the stand last week, he said, I was detoxing in a really bad way during that interview. Remember, he said that, which is why his story, he claims, has changed a little bit. Carmen's story's changed too, right? But he's saying he came up and their stories were different. He's saying, look, this was my interview back then, but I was detoxing in a really bad way during that. And look, I don't know. I don't know what it's like to detox. I think he sounded pretty coherent, in my opinion. Correct me if I'm wrong. Again, I don't know what it feels like to detox. He also said it felt like the investigators were telling him what he did and didn't do. In other words, sort of planting some things. I didn't really get that vibe of them planting any information or anything like that either. He seemed very agreeable, but those are his arguments from last week. So let's take a listen and process this together.
In a position right now of either telling us what you know about it and basically not hurting anybody because Carmen and Nicole have both already talked to us here and you're verifying information we have. Or if you don't want to talk to us, that's fine. We'll pursue it federally because we know that you sold them the fentanyl that resulted in the death. So that's kind of where we're at. And I'm not trying to bullshit you. I'm just kind of laying it out exactly how it is right now.
So I know who Nicole is.
Okay.
About a year ago.
February 5th and 25th is when Carmen messaged Nicole. Nicole gave her your information. Okay. Then you guys set up 2 transactions at the Maverick and Draper. Okay.
Of last year.
Yes. So not this previous February, a year before that. It's been a bit.
Yeah. Man. Yeah, I'm still quite a bit. So I'm not trying to be a douchebag or nothing. So remember that much time passed. And do you have a number that she bought for me? Was it a quantity?
She said between 20 and 30 pills both times.
Okay. Then probably, yeah.
Do you remember going to that Maverick and Draper? Were you living down there at the time, or?
She lives. I want to say she lives pretty far away.
She lives in Heber.
Yeah, so like that was just where we were meeting.
Where were you coming from? Where were you living at the time?
Man, I've been living a little bit everywhere. Maybe the last couple of years.
So it's kind of ringing back. You're kind of getting a little bit more. Well, tell me what you can remember about it.
I remember Nicole calling me and saying, "Hey, can you be my friend?" You know, but yeah. So and then she was like, "Oh, she wants a lot."
Is 30 a lot for you, or is that a lot for Nicole?
I think it was a lot for Nicole. It wasn't a lot for me, but okay. I didn't know anybody died. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and we didn't expect that you knew that. And like I said, that's why at this point, your information, we're not interested in jamming you up or the distribution of it or anything like that. We're doing our investigation. You're kind of just on the edges of it a little bit as kind of an involved player as being the hook basically for it. We're not interested in jamming you up or anything like that, but we are interested in the information you have to provide to us that validates what people have already told us.
Okay, as far as I know, I met her just 2 times. I think I talked to her a couple more times after, but just to see, you know what I mean? Hey, you know, because somebody's spending, you know what I mean? You know, $500-600.
Is that what 30 around about $500 or $600?
Yeah.
So, okay. And did you hit her up afterwards to see if she wanted more, or did she hit you up afterwards?
I think I asked her one other time, and then she just didn't.
She's like, hey, you looking for any more or something?
Yeah, something like that. She just didn't respond to me. You know what I mean?
Do you remember how you contacted her? Was it text messaging, messenger?
I want to say it was text messages, but I haven't had that. I haven't had it for the longest time.
What phone would it have been on?
My phone. Fuck. Maybe a 3336156 number.
You still have that phone? Okay. The phone you have now is a newer one then?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you contacted that
No.
Carmen at all with that phone or anything? Do you know where that old phone would have been that would have had those text messages on it?
No, I lost that phone. A lot of it.
Okay. Well, what did you think the phone number was, you said?
385 333.
Okay. So with these transactions, when Carmen hit you up, what did she tell you?
She told me she had a friend that wanted, you know,
Did she ask for blue specifically or fentanyl specifically, or did she ask for oxys, or what did she ask for?
I think she might have asked me for blue. I can't remember.
But you sold her until you, right?
Yeah, I told her she knew what she was buying.
Okay, so she, it wasn't like she's asking for oxys or something like that, she got the answer.
Right, no.
Okay, so she knew that there was fentanyl in those pills.
Absolutely.
You remember where you got those pills from?
I don't. I said it right.
Okay. What else can you tell us about that? That's all we're here to talk to you about, was that transaction, those two transactions, I guess, a little over a year ago. We don't care about anything else, but what else can you remember about those?
She was with the older guy.
You remember what kind of car they showed up in?
No. Well, shit, one time it was like a truck. Like a white truck or something.
Okay. When you say she was with an older guy, do you remember about ballpark how old he would have been?
I don't know. He's probably.
You thought maybe one time in a truck, but you couldn't remember the other one.
They were in a car the other time. I don't remember what car.
Okay.
The first time she was in the truck, though, for sure.
When you guys were to show up with Maverick, where would you go? Would you go around back of Maverick, or just right there at
Just
the
right in
office? Yeah. Just a quick hand to hand.
Yeah, there you go.
And it's just said about $600 or so of what you charge for those. Do you remember? So I think she would have ordered more the second time. Do you remember the quantity? And
I don't remember exactly.
but you remember being there twice.
Yeah. I really remember meeting her twice because you guys told me I met her twice. I would have spent it once.
But do you remember now? They're kind of
Yeah.
jogged your memory.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think of anything else about those babies with her or anything?
That's the only 6 times I talked to her.
Okay. How do you know Nicole?
This dude named Cam. I was staying with him, Roy, for a while. And she stayed there for a little while. And then she took off. And then Cam's a fucking widow. And we all do it. There's nothing on her. So,
Okay. So Nicole just hit you up and said, hey, would you go and be with my friend? You're like, yeah, that's cool. We're in the apartment. Did she call you or text you?
I believe she called me.
All the time or just that one time? Or?
I think she was like saying, like, she was texting, like, hey, what's up? And then one of us called the other one.
Like, Nicole's friend or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
How long was your
Like, Nicole's friend or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
how long was your
I think she was like saying, like, she was texting, like, hey, what's up? And then one of us called the other one.
Could you press pause? We'll fix that. Yeah. My apologies.
She was living. She was on up there, or drug court or some shit, wherever she was living. She was on, yeah, she did run AP&P or on drug court or something. I don't remember, and she had to hurry. It was always in a hurry, like, she was like, okay, well, I'm leaving here now, so I can meet you like halfway. Can you meet me halfway? Oh, yeah, I can do that.
And halfway was that Maverick there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You said one time she came with an older guy. Do you remember if that was the first time or the second time?
I believe it was the second time.
First time, do you remember if she showed up with anybody?
I don't know.
Okay, I think those are all the questions we had for you. If we have any more follow-up questions, you want to talk to us again as we kind of progress with this a little bit further? Yeah. Okay. I appreciate you talking to us, Robert. Like I said, we're not here to jam you up over anything. We're just here to try and get some information and see what you
I
got.
fucking one day wake up with some fucking manslaughter charges.
No, we're not going to pursue that. Like I said, if you didn't want to help us out or anything, we kind of have this view right now that the people we're interviewing, we've got enough information that we're just trying to verify it. kind of either helping us out or you're not. And if you're not, you might, honestly. But all you've done right now, so we've already talked, Carmen's already talked, and Nicole's already talked. So you're not telling us anything we didn't know. You're not protecting anybody by not talking to us. All you'd be doing is basically rolling the dice for your future if you didn't want to talk to us. Because when the deaths are involved, the prosecutors do get a little spun up over it. And with fentanyl in the federal system, if you don't know this, if you get caught dealing fentanyl that results in a death, you could potentially face federal charges. It doesn't matter if you intended to cause the death or anything else like that. They're cracking down on it. So I don't know how long you're in for with. I know you're on possession with intent stuff, but if you are still dealing, don't be dealing with that shit anymore because the feds are coming down hard on it, and it's only a matter of time, especially with how nasty that shit is.
Most of this is giving my name.
Well, we already verified it through phone records. We already knew who they got it from. It wasn't like they told us anything we didn't know either.
Yeah.
We've been able to find everything we need through digital evidence and all the contact, all the messages on Facebook, all that stuff.
Yeah, we knew all of that before we made contact with anybody.
Yeah. So it wasn't like they were diming you out or anything.
Yeah, well, me and Carmen were friends on Facebook.
We actually were the ones that brought up your name to Nicole because we already knew that Nicole had put you in touch with Carmen, and we already knew all of that information. So we're just trying to verify stories is all we're trying to do at this point. So, do you have any questions for us or anything like that?
Other than this isn't gonna backdoor me here.
No.
All right.
We're not here to jam you up or anything like that. We don't give a shit about what's going on down here or anything like that.
I was just going to ask you, do any of your people ever tell you what they're going to use it for themselves, if they're going to try to sell it to anybody else, what their intents are?
Everybody that I deal with does it themselves.
All right. So I was looking at a few of your comments to see what you guys thought. Here are a few things you said. And by the way, thanks for all the memberships. It's raining memberships, as Monty said there in chat. You get a membership, it's like Oprah, and you get a membership, and you get a membership. You guys are awesome. So Tammy says he knew the dates, times, numbers, and names while detoxing, but barely remembered anything in court. Exactly. Renee says, no wonder the defense didn't want this entered into evidence. It is damning. And then this is an interesting one. I don't believe any of these cops. They're looking for a conviction, but they're willing to make deals with drug dealers for a conviction. Marcy sees, I think Robbie got cold feet and was worried over there. Someone else, I don't think he was honest on the stand at all. And Catalina says this has to be hell on earth for Eric's family and kids. Yeah, I can only imagine. They actually scanned over often to Eric's family and sister during a lot of today's testimony. I cannot imagine how they're feeling. All right. Yeah, someone, okay, Fox Red Dog Mom says, after today's day in trial, Robbie is a liar. Carmen is not. Can't convince me otherwise. Again, coming in blind here. Interesting. So, all right. Well, anyway, after that recording, yeah, I can see why the defense didn't want that in. His story certainly changed, and fentanyl was definitely much more of a prominent possibility there, right? After that recording wrapped up, the state called Molly Crosswhite to the stand. Molly was an interesting, unexpected witness. Molly testified that she does not know Kouri personally, but what did she do? She bought a home from Kouri. They closed on the property January 26th, 2022. So that would be before Eric Richins died, like less than 2 months, like about a month and a little bit, a month and change before Eric's death. And Molly said she never actually moved into the house herself. Instead, she planned to rent it out. The lease began for her renters on March 1st. Okay. But they didn't physically move in until March 30th, 2022. Okay. So now the timeline there is after Eric Richins' death. Eric Richins' death was March 4th. So nobody even moved in until March 30th. Thus, what she's kind of implying is this was a vacant home until March 30th, 2022. And that's the key part. Molly testified that no one was living in the home between the day she closed in late January and the end of March when the renters moved in. And again, if you've been following closely, you probably see this, why this matters. Earlier in the trial, the defense pressed Carmen Lauber, who most of us seem to agree is telling the truth more than we believe Robbie's telling the truth. So the defense pressed Carmen Lauber about whether she knew Kouri no longer owned the home where Carmen claims she picked up money and dropped off drugs. The defense clearly suggesting that Carmen's timeline didn't make sense because Kouri had already sold the house. But today, the prosecution seemed to be filling in that gap for the jury and for us watching from home, right? Even if Kouri had technically sold the house, the state is showing it was sitting empty for weeks. No renters. No one is occupying it. So theoretically, it could still have been used as a drop-off location because that's what Carmen testified to put it in the fire pit at one of Kouri Richins' properties. That's what she was directed to do. And now we're learning, yes, it was indeed vacant. Molly also testified that the locks remained the same from the time she closed on January 26th until the renters moved in. And Bloodworth asked that specifically. And Molly said, yes, which strongly suggests Kouri likely still had a key, right? Bloodworth also asked about renovations. Molly explained that before she purchased the home, Kouri had done renovation work and had possession of the keys during that time. Oh, okay, so even more emphasis and evidence that Kouri could get in. So as far as Molly knew, the house was vacant between late January and late March 2022. Okay, no further questions from the state. By the way, I just want to point out, can you imagine being subpoenaed to a high-profile trial because you purchased a property? I mean, Molly, she came on this, and I can't imagine the world watching her. Anyway, defense attorney Lewis got up and immediately pulled up the real estate contract. The contract was dated January 14th, 2022. Closing happened January 26th. And Lewis asked Molly if she did a walkthrough between those dates, and Molly said yes. Lewis asked what was inside the home during that walkthrough. Molly said the home had been staged while it was on the market, so there was furniture at one point, but during the final walkthrough a couple days before closing, the furniture had been removed. She did not recall seeing boxes, cups, or items left behind in closets. I think that Carmen said the money or drugs were supposedly left in a cup there. And so Lewis pressed on that. Like, if there had been items left, would you have asked for them to be removed? And Molly said, well, if it was something small, like a single cup, she probably would have just tossed it herself, right? Yeah, I agree. You don't need to come call and ask someone to remove a cup. Then Lewis turned to February 2022, and Molly testified that contractors were working on the home throughout February. And this is important again, February 2022 are the dates. It's the timeline that Carmen testified to. But also remember, there's not just a murder charge on the table. There's also an attempted murder charge on the table for February 14th, 2022, Valentine's Day. That's an important date. That there was an alleged sandwich that prosecutors say was left for Eric, that he survived Valentine's Day. But less than a month later, he was dead. So February 2022 is also important. And Molly testified that contractors were working on the home throughout February. She specifically mentioned February 10th through the 14th and possibly the 19th and 20th. She wasn't sure if they were there all day, every day, but they were in and out doing various projects to get the rental ready. Lewis asked about the keys, and when Molly purchased the home, did she get all of the keys from Kouri? And Molly explained that a key used for access, like one left typically in a lockbox or hidden outside, did remain at the property for the contractors. She said that she left it somewhere you'd expect a hidden key to be, like under a mat or a pot. She even acknowledged that might not have been the best hiding place, and Lewis asked whether contractors kept the home locked. Molly said she didn't know for sure, but she would expect them to. And there was also testimony that Molly didn't have direct communication with Kouri after closing because she was represented by another real estate agent. Before closing, they discussed additional work that needed to be done, and everyone understood the home couldn't be rented out immediately. Lewis asked whether Kouri or her agent would have known when contractors were coming and going or when renters would move in, and Molly said that she was not sure. They communicated the house would not be rentable right away, but she didn't know the exact dates and if they were shared. So reading between the lines here in this testimony, it seems as if the state is suggesting Kouri could have reasonably assumed the house was still vacant during that window, right? That's why she would send Carmen there to drop off the drugs that she later wanted to pick up. The defense, meanwhile, is pointing out the contractors were coming and going, and a key was hidden outside for the contractors. So if someone were using that house as a secret drop location, it would be incredibly risky. But risky doesn't mean impossible. Lewis also asked Molly about a prior interview with the defense investigator, and Molly confirmed she told him that when she took possession of the home, nothing was left inside. Lewis asked whether she turned the key over directly to contractors. Molly clarified that she never met them on site. She would have told them where the key was hidden, and Lewis had nothing further. Next up was Allison Wright. Allison has worked at C&E Stone Masonry since it was established in 2010. This is Eric Richins' company. She does administrative work and bookkeeping. She first met Eric Richins in school. He was friends with her sister and spent time at their home, so they go way back. Her husband, Kouri Wright, was Eric's business partner. I find this really interesting. We're hearing from Eric's business partner's wife. Allison met Kouri when she first started dating Eric, so right away. And the state showed Allison examples of handwriting and returned checks from C&E's business checking account. And she testified that she gathered those checks from the company's accounting books and banking records and provided them to Katie, Eric's sister, who was there sitting in the gallery today. Katie, Eric's sister. And then the state, they directed back to February 2019 and asked about a vacation that Allison took with Eric, Kouri, and her husband, Cody, and others. So there are a couple that, these are a couple of friends that even vacation together, okay? And Allison said that she remembered a conversation with Kouri that stood out on that vacation. She said the two of them ended up alone at one point and started talking about life, family, and kids, okay? Vacation talk. And before she could go further, there was an objection. We're all on the edge of our seats. We're like, okay, she's going to talk about the vacation conversation she had with Kouri, and then there's an objection, of course. So it appeared the state hadn't asked a narrowly tailored question, and Allison was about to launch into a full narrative, which is what we were all hoping for. I was like, just give us the tea. Tell us. Give us a full recap. Tell us everything. Who said what? What was everyone wearing? Where were we? The whole recap. But no, that's not what happened. There was an objection to that. So Judge Mrazek excused the jury so they could sort of sort this out outside the presence of the jury. The state asked Allison to preview what she would say. And so Allison described that during the conversation, Kouri said things weren't great in her marriage. Okay. And she said that Kouri felt trapped. And Kouri felt trapped. Why did Kouri feel trapped? Well, Kouri felt trapped, according to Allison, partly because of this prenuptial agreement that she had, right? Allison, she had to sign a prenup. And Allison testified that Kouri believed Eric would continue to benefit financially and maintain their lifestyle, while she would be in a very different position. She said Kouri feared the kids would gravitate towards Eric's life more if the marriage ended. And according to Allison, Kouri was unhappy but scared of what ending the marriage would look like. The prosecutor asked whether that conversation later gave Allison context for Kouri's business decisions at the time. And Allison said yes, things started to make more sense. During that 2019 vacation to Costa Rica, nonetheless, Kouri talked about feeling trapped in her marriage because of a prenup. And she said, there were a lot of concerns again, the gravitating towards Eric, and a lot of concerns. And so Kouri, she also mentioned things about Kouri. Allison said that she admired Kouri, right? That she was impressed that Kouri went back and got her master's degree. She described her as motivated. She described her as hardworking ambitious. I do think that Kouri is all of those things. She also said that Kouri was trying to become financially independent, building her real estate business. And she respected that. Allison respected that. The defense, though, they pushed back hard. They pointed out that this conversation happened in 2019, 3 years before Eric's death, 3 years before his death. And in that time, they said the couple went to counseling and they worked on their marriage, and there was a lot of water under the bridge. It makes sense. 3 years, 3 years is a fair thing to say by the defense. A lot can happen in 3 years, right? They argued there's no allegation that Kouri was planning a murder 3 years in advance, so a private conversation between two women venting about a marriage, issues on vacation shouldn't be relevant. I disagree with that. I think it's relevant, but there's context. So this is where the judge has to come in, right? So Judge Mrazek disagreed. He ruled it is relevant because it shows Kouri was aware of the financial implications of divorce due to the prenup. That's where I think it's relevant too. Very relevant. The defense then asked if it's coming in that if it should be limited strictly to the financial aspect. Then they argued that saying she felt unhappy or trapped would be unfairly prejudicial. Well, I still think that's relevant. Judge Mrazek ultimately ruled that the state could question Allison about the financial component and that the value of that outweighed any unfair prejudice. And at that point, the defense made it very clear that they intended to challenge Allison's credibility and potential bias. That's what you do, right? If someone can't control what you say, they can at least control how others see you. Attack your credibility. And that's what the defense made very clear they were about to do to Allison. So when the jury returned, Allison repeated the substance of that conversation. She testified that Kouri did say she felt trapped and that there was a prenup and that she was frustrated in the relationship. It would be difficult to leave. Eric would be the one that was financially secure. The kids would want to hang out with Eric and not her. And she was insecure about how she'd be viewed in the community. It was interesting to hear her say this, but she also said that she was tender towards Kouri's situation at the time, right? And the state connected it back to business. Allison testified that Kouri, she was trying and she did feel empathy for her. And there were no further questions after that. And the defense attorney, Nestor, though, stepped up, ready to do what we knew that they were going to do. Question Allison's credibility, right? She asked where this conversation took place. Allison again said, it's Costa Rica. Nestor asked if there was a reason. They were discussing marriage troubles. I'm like, have you ever been on, with girls on a trip? They start talking about everything. But she asked, why were you discussing marriage troubles? And they said, was Kouri upset about something specific at the time? And Allison said she just wasn't sure. Just that things were hard at home. And Nestor then went straight at it. She suggested that the reason Kouri was upset was because she believed Eric was having an affair with a coworker. Well, the state immediately objected. The judge overruled it. I was kind of surprised by that because it was absolutely a moment where the defense was testifying, right? Like Allison's not saying this. The defense is saying this, that Eric might have been having an affair. So the state immediately objected. Judge overruled it. Surprised by that. Allison testified that she and Kouri never discussed Eric having an affair during that conversation. And then at that moment, we saw Kouri's eyebrows lift, similar to moments earlier in the trial where she seemed to react to testimony she didn't like. She definitely is an eyebrow lifter. It almost looked like a silent, like, wait a minute, you don't remember this expression? Like, wait, what? The defense pressed again. Wasn't the reason that they kept going because, the judge overruled the objection. So they kept going. They're like, great, thank you. Wasn't the reason she was unhappy was because she thought Eric was having an affair. And Allison said she doesn't recall that being discussed. So Nestor asked whether Allison was aware at the time that Eric was having an affair with a coworker. Allison said she wasn't sure when she found out or whether she already knew at the time of that vacation. Then the defense shifted to potential bias. Allison testified that she and her husband, Cody, used to vacation with Kouri and Eric, but that eventually stopped. Nestor asked if that was because Eric and Cody had a falling out, and Allison said that they still attended birthday parties and events, but they were not as close as couples after COVID. So Nestor pushed further. Didn't Cody call the police on Eric? This is interesting. Allison said no. Well, they pushed further then. Didn't Cody testify against Eric for violating hunting laws? The state objected for lack of foundation. After some back and forth, Nestor asked whether Allison was aware that Cody provided information to law enforcement about a hunting violation. Allison said yes, and that Eric and Cody had a temporary falling out because of that. Interesting. They never vacationed together after that. Business partners. Interesting. And then Nestor drilled into finances. Allison confirmed she handles bookkeeping for C&E Stone Masonry, which, C&E Stone Masonry is Cody and Eric's business, C&E. And she knows how much money is coming in and going out. So, right, she's really in the know. And Nestor asked whether she and Cody shared marital money or if Cody keeps his business money separate. And Allison said they share marital money. The state objected as out of scope, like, why are we talking about this? But the objection was sustained by the judge. Nestor rephrased and emphasized that Allison is very aware of C&E's financial affairs. And that Allison could agree to. And then came another bias angle. And when I'm saying bias, I mean, does Allison have a bias to testify one way or another? And so the defense is pointing out that Allison's testimony might be very biased to the state, to the prosecution. So another bias angle then that the defense brings up is that Nestor then asks whether, since Eric's death, she and Cody have become very close with the Richins family. And Allison responded, well, they've always been very close to the Richins family. Nestor then pointed out, well, but you and Cody, you guys have accompanied the Richins family to court hearings. And Allison acknowledged that they have. The defense said they would be recalling Allison later. So she's not done. And that was an interesting moment to say, not only are you very close with the Richins family, you come with them to court hearings. You support them in this. So it is showing a bias. It is a bias angle that they have here. They said that they'd be recalling Allison later, so she's not done. The jury was then released for lunch. And during the break, the attorneys argued about call detail records. The defense said they were not given proper notice that specific call records would be used at trial. Judge Mrazek said the issue would be addressed after lunch. And then, get this, there was also a note from a juror. Yeah, another note. When they said we have a note from the juror, I was like, oh my gosh, I've never seen a trial with continuous notes from jurors. What's this one going to be? I was holding my breath because, again, the last one was about somebody in the gallery sketching them, which is so problematic and actually kind of scary. So there was a note from a juror. The juror disclosed that they had met Molly Crosswhite professionally and completed one home transaction where they work. So that was the woman that had just testified about the purchasing the home. And so the juror is like, wait a minute, I know this person, or we had a home transaction. So Judge Mrazek said it didn't appear to present an issue, right? People are going to know people in Summit County if they serve on a public jury. After lunch, the judge ruled on the call detail records objection. He said the records had been provided during discovery and were listed in the state's exhibit list. And that meant the defense had notice and a fair opportunity to challenge them. Okay, fair. The objection was overruled, but then things got tense again. Defense attorney Wendy Lewis came back to that juror issue. The juror wrote the note confessing, look, I knew one of the witnesses. There was a business relationship we had. So Wendy Lewis came back to the juror issue. And she said she did have concerns about the juror who disclosed knowing Molly Crosswhite professionally. So the defense did have issues with this. And the defense Lewis argued that if they had known about this connection during jury selection, that juror would have likely not even made it onto the panel. She said the defense had to push back on Crosswhite during testimony. And if a juror holds her in high regard because of a prior business dealing, that could create bias. So in other words, they're saying, wait, we had to really push back and make her not look so great, right? And so now if this person really likes her, That's going to make us look bad. I mean, things to think about when you're a defense attorney anyway. Who looks worse? The defense attorney really pushing back on a witness that seems nice and credible, or does the witness actually look bad? So they're saying, well, wait a minute. Now this could be a problem for us. This could create bias for us. So Lewis formally asked for that juror to actually be dismissed. That's how far she went. Prosecutor Bloodworth, though, responded by saying they don't even know the nature of the business relationship. He suggested conducting limited voir dire, basically questioning the juror further to understand voir dire's juror questions, like questioning to learn more about this relationship, more than a note, to sort of determine whether there's an actual bias concern before removing them completely. Judge Mrazek said he would rule on it later. For now, he didn't see harm in leaving the juror in place until they gather more information. And then the defense made a much bigger move. Nestor raised a motion for mistrial. She brought the court back. Yeah, mistrial, a mistrial. And we had heard about this last week. So we're like, okay, what is it going to be? So she brings the court back to her cross-examination of Chelsea Gibson earlier in the trial. Chelsea was on the stand for a few days. And Nestor said she had been very careful in laying foundation for what are known as home wave calls. Remember this? Home wave calls, which are recorded jail calls. It's a fancy way of saying recorded jail calls without saying recorded jail calls. They tell me they're recorded jail calls without telling me. You call them home wave calls. And Nestor said that she deliberately avoided using the language jailhouse calls because that would reveal custody status, and even warned Chelsea Gibson to mirror her wording, like mirror it back to me. And despite that, Gibson still used the phrase jailhouse calls in front of the jury. And to remind all of you, she pretty much said, were there any recorded calls? She didn't say home wave calls at first. She actually said to Chelsea Gibson, were there any recorded calls? And Chelsea Gibson, I think, innocently responded, do you mean jailhouse calls? That's what they're referring to. It wasn't good to the defense. They felt very upset about that because she said jailhouse calls in front of the jury, and they argued that case law makes it clear that informing a jury a defendant is incarcerated can implicate the Sixth Amendment right to a fair trial. She said it chips away at the presumption of innocence, right? There are appellate decisions warning that evidence of custody, that the defendant's in custody status carries a risk of prejudice. Even if it's this sort of subtle prejudice, this subconscious prejudice, it can influence how jurors view a defendant. She acknowledged that Judge Mrazek has broad discretion in handling these situations. She also noted that he gave a limiting instruction, telling jurors not to consider that comment, jailhouse calls. But she argued that sometimes giving that instruction just underscores that it was said in the first place, right? Don't think about that is going to make people think about that. Hey, you didn't hear that. Jailhouse calls were never said. And what are the jurors going to remember? Jailhouse calls. So Judge Mrazek then responded that the issue was noted for the record. He said, while the comment wasn't proper, it wasn't intentional. He didn't see by either party. It was made in passing. I agree with this. This is how I viewed it. And in his view, relatively innocuous, given the nature of the case. He pointed out this is a homicide trial. This isn't like, shoplifting. This is a homicide trial. So pretty much would not shock jurors to know the defendant had been arrested at some point. And he also said the curative instruction was sufficient to address any potential prejudice. There you go. The motion for mistrial was denied. I have to agree. I've said the same thing. I guess they could think that she's out on bail and maybe, has an ankle monitor, but I don't think anybody thinks that someone charged with homicide hasn't been to jail, right? So I agree with the judge there. Anyway, Lily's next to me. She's starting to move. Okay. Anyway, next up was Major Crimes Detective Jeff O'Driscoll with the Summit County Sheriff's Office. The state asked him whether during the investigation he seized a cell phone belonging to Carmen Lauber in April 2023. He said yes. It was a black Samsung phone with a number ending in 6127. He testified that it was booked into evidence and later downloaded with the help of Chelsea Gibson using Cellbrite software. Love me Cellbrite. I love it when Cellbrite comes into trials because it's always the cell phone text. Always. Cell phones, I don't know. They hold secrets. And whenever you hear Cellbrite, you know it's going to be interesting. Anyway, that was basically it, though, from the state. No deep dive yet. So just big picture testimony at this point. So just foundation. And if you've been following this case, you know Detective O'Driscoll is a central figure in this investigation. So I feel like it's just like he just got up to lay groundwork for something much bigger that's likely still coming. So, you know, I think that's true. So I'm sure we'll see plenty of O'Driscoll later on. We'll just have to wait. This foundation lane honestly can be it's like a trailer. It's like a preview of what's to come. It's like it's like a tease. You're like, okay, you know, when's the premiere? Anyway, the defense had just one question. They clarified that O'Driscoll is the chief investigator in this case. He confirmed that he is. And the next witness on the stand was Chris Kotradimos. He currently owns a business called M20 Solutions. And he explained that his company does investigations, training, consultations for prosecutors, defense teams, and law enforcement. A major focus of his work is digital forensics. So before starting his own company, he worked in law enforcement. And in this case, he was asked to analyze phone downloads and records, specifically 3 phones. Oh, 3 phones. And these 3 phones are belonging to Kouri, and 1 belonging to Eric, and 1 belonging to Carmen Lauber, the former housekeeper. And then 1 to Josh Grossman and 1 to Robert Crozier. He explained that digital forensics is the analysis of electronic devices. And Cellbrite is a company that provides extraction and analysis tools. So we walk the jury through some terminology. Okay, CDR. CDR stands for Call Detail Records. Those come from your cell phone carrier and show incoming and outgoing calls. Got it. And then there's text, location data, web history, and other activity. Law enforcement can obtain those records, including associated location data. Kotradimos testified that he used a Cellbrite physical analyzer, which allows you to review the files extracted from a phone. And he said it can sometimes show whether data has been deleted, although deleted content isn't always recoverable, depending on how long ago it was removed. He was brought into this case in May 2023 to analyze the phone downloads. So this is his thing that he does. He does the phone downloads. And he didn't personally, though, perform the extractions. He reviewed the report. So the extraction happens and then it's handed off to him. And he sort of deciphers all of it. Starting with Eric's phone, Kotradimos said he did not find evidence of mass deletions. So Eric wasn't out there deleting a bunch of stuff on his phone, in other words. He did review text messages. He reviewed device activity data and biometric data. He specifically looked for references to THC gummies because, you know, Kouri said that's what he used. And he found text conversations between Eric and Kouri about those in November 2021 and January 2022. And then the state displayed those messages in court. He also searched for anything related to illicit drug use. He testified that he did not find communications on Eric's phone about buying drugs. Oh, well, shoot. There goes the theory about Eric's secret drug life, right? Nope. He did not find communications on Eric's phone about buying drugs. That definitely pokes a hole in the defense's theory. Again, a lot of wins for the prosecution today. So Eric's secret drug life, not really prominent on his phone. So that theory is kind of not holding up. Then the focus shifted to Kouri's white iPhone. Kotradimos testified that she had 2 phone numbers associated with that device. One was through her cellular carrier. The other was through an app-based number, multiple numbers. That's always a little suspicious to me too. He explained that the app-based number would not necessarily save its details in traditional call records. And then on that white iPhone, he found evidence of deletions. Oh, so Kouri does have evidence of deletions. Okay. Just take a note of that. Kouri has evidence of deletions. And according to his testimony, between January and March 2022, there were hundreds of deleted text messages, deleted web history entries, and deleted call logs. And this is how he described it. He described it as significant chunks of data missing during that time frame. for Kouri. Then he discussed Kouri's silver iPhone, which she obtained on April 14th, 2022. Oh, so she obtained a brand new cell phone, brand new iPhone after the death of her husband on April 14th, 2022, a month after his death. And compared to the white phone, there were some deletions, but not nearly to the same extent as around that time. He said there weren't large blocks of missing data like on the earlier device. That sounds like she was kind of trying to move on from, right, by buying the new phone. There was also a blue iPhone that Kouri was using at the same time as the silver phone. 2 phones, always, again, okay, 2 phones. And then moving to Carmen Lauber's phone, Coach Demas testified that there were deletions there as well, including hundreds of calls and text messages. And then he analyzed Josh Grossman's phone. Again, Josh Grossman is the paramour of Kouri, the one that she was having an affair with. And he said the volume of communication between Kouri and Grossman from November 2021 was daily. So daily communication between her and the paramour. I don't, side, as Kathy from Gossip Room and Innuendo says, side piece, but paramour in this trial. And that was daily. So text communications between Grossman and Kouri daily. And he testified that the content of those communications was located on Grossman's phone because Kouri used the app-based number to communicate with him, which didn't preserve traditional carrier records. So on top of that, she had deleted significant data from her own device. Coach Demas also mentioned locating a vacation reservation on Kouri's phone. I think that's the vacation they planned to Secrets Resort. And then that's no longer a secret, but then came the number that released it out from January to March 2022. There were approximately 800 text messages exchanged between Kouri and Carmen Lauber. Okay, so that's from January to March 2022, less than 2 months. 800 text messages exchanged between Kouri and Carmen. In other words, again, Eric Richins died March 4th, 2022, and this was from January to March, so probably until his death. 800 text messages between Carmen and Kouri, exchanged between them. And then from March to December of 2022, so months after Eric's death, there were about 650. So that's roughly a 70% decrease in communication after that January to March window. And because so many messages were deleted, we don't know what many of them said. At this point, the state appears to be building a timeline through digital, bits and pieces here and there, like who was talking to who, how often, what disappeared, who was trying to hide what. Coach Demas then zeroed in on those specific dates, and he testified that on February 11th, 2022, so 3 days before the attempted murder, the state alleges, the alleged attempted murder, 3 days, February 11th, because it's Valentine's Day. February 11th, 2022, Kouri made 3 phone calls to the IRS. And then that same day, she and Carmen Lauber, former housekeeper, they were also communicating. There was also cell tower data pulled from Carmen's phone. And the state displayed a map showing the communication patterns between Kouri, Carmen, and Robert Crozier, who we saw earlier in the body cam footage, or I guess not body cam, the police interview. So Coach Demas walked the jury through Carmen's movements that day. Her phone activity showed her traveling through Heber, down Provo Canyon, and into Draper. And while she was moving, she and Kouri were in communication. They were talking, chatting as she drove to Draper. And at the same time, Robert Crozier's phone was leaving Davis County and heading toward Utah County. And this is one of the dates. Carmen testified she picked up pills for Kouri. So Coach Demas testified that Crozier's phone activity increased significantly as the afternoon went on, meaning, and meanwhile, Kouri and Carmen were communicating throughout the afternoon and into the evening. Another exhibit showed the volume of communication between Carmen and Crozier, specifically on February 11th. And then we moved to February 14th, 2022, that Valentine's Day that I keep bringing up. 8:53 p.m., Kouri called the Mirror Lake Diner, and there was also communication between Kouri and Josh Grossman, paramour, that day. Several messages between Kouri and Grossman were displayed for the jury. And here's what it included. On Valentine's Day, when she's married to someone else, they included, I love you, I want to be my Valentine's, and my heart is smiling when those 3 words come from you. It's very unique, different than any time I've heard them before, end quote. Honestly, those sounded like sweetheart hearts that you could buy from the store. Not very creative, but nonetheless, those were their texts between one another, showing that they had a very loving relationship. And Coach Demas also pointed out a text from Eric to Kouri at 11:33 a.m. that same day, Valentine's Day. And Eric said he didn't feel well and was going to lay down. And then more Valentine's Day texts were displayed between Kouri and Eric. And they were going back and forth that afternoon. Eric was home. Kouri was not home. Eric said he wished that she was there. That's sweet. And the exchange ended with Kouri telling him there was food on the seat of the truck. Again, that's the infamous sandwich the state is claiming may have been a murder weapon, the alleged attempted murder. Then Coach Demas showed a graph of Eric's phone movement on February 14th. There was an 87-minute gap in recorded activity between 12:05 p.m. and 1:32 p.m. No movement data during that time. Coach Demas testified that after analyzing other days on Eric's phone, that kind of midday gap was not typical for him. So what's going on? Because it's not a pattern, right? They're looking at patterns. This is not typical to have this sort of midday gap on a device. Well, the state then displayed cell tower mapping from February 26, 2022. Kouri and Carmen texted 71 times between 2:25 p.m. and 10:33 p.m. that day. And then Carmen and Robert Crozier communicated 65 times that day, like more times than there have been sidebars in this entire trial. That's how much Carmen and Robert Crozier, the housekeeper and the pill supplier, are communicating 65 times. Next were call records from March 2nd, 2022. At 10:22 a.m., Kouri made an outgoing 3-minute call to the IRS. Strange. And then at 10:27 a.m., also, who makes just a 3-minute call to the IRS? And at 10:27 a.m., there was a 101-minute phone call, a much longer phone call. And then we moved to March 9th, 2022. A cell tower map showed text conversations between Kouri and Carmen beginning early at 6:28 a.m. and continuing throughout the day. They started early on these text messages this day. Carmen's phone traveled down Provo Canyon to the Maverick in Draper, where she states this exchange happened with Robert Crozier. And what's Robert Crozier's phone during this time? Well, it's also traveling from Davis County to Draper as well. And then another map showed communication between Carmen and Crozier starting at 10:15 a.m. and lasting until about 11:28 p.m. Their devices met up in the Draper area. It's very clear here. Both leaving separate locations, meeting up in the Draper area. Coach Demas testified that Carmen's phone never visited the Draper area except on the 3 dates when she met with Crozier at Maverick. This is damning. Like, this is why they were there. It's like they are just setting the stage here. You cannot dispute that this happened. So then the focus shifted to you just can't dispute this happened. And then the focus shifted to March 3rd, 2022, the night Eric died. A timeline of Eric's phone activity between 8:30 p.m. and midnight was displayed. He was texting work associates. He had a call at 9:45 p.m. He searched how far it is from Scottsdale to Nogales, Mexico. Okay. And then at 10:13 p.m., he received a text from a contact named Raul, and there's no indication that text was ever opened or read. So in other words, the night he died, let me be clear. They said they declared Eric died March 4th in the morning, early morning hours. That's when Kouri called 911, but this is implying it might have been earlier, but he was declared dead March 4th. So this is March 3rd, the night before, the night Eric died. And a timeline of Eric's phone activity. So once again, between 8:30 p.m. and midnight, that was displayed for the court. He was texting work associates. He had a call at 9:45 p.m. And then he searched how far from Scottsdale Scottsdale to Nogales after that. And then at 10:13 p.m., a text that it looks like he never opened. So it's giving us a timeline of probably when he died or when the fentanyl was ingested, because it's 9:45 p.m. He's responding. 10:13, no, nothing ever again. That's it. So then we see Kouri's phone activity from that same night into the early morning hours until she called 911, right? So between 8:30 p.m. and midnight, her phone was locked and unlocked multiple times. That disputes her story. Her story is that she was laying with her son, right, in bed. But her phone was locked and unlocked multiple times around 8:30 p.m. and midnight. And then at 3:06 a.m., the phone was unlocked for 28 seconds. And this is the time she claims that, she woke up to find Eric, right? And that she just quickly called 911, but it unlocked for 28 seconds. At 3:07 a.m., the speaker was activated. At 3:08 a.m., the device moved 243 feet. At 3:10 a.m., it was unlocked for 1 minute and 40 seconds. At 3:15 a.m., it's unlocked again for 37 seconds. And at 3:19 a.m., it's unlocked for 28 seconds. And then again, briefly. This is not a phone that's sitting still. At 3:21 a.m., the phone moved 135 feet. At 3:22 a.m., the receiver was activated. The courtroom is very quiet during this portion. Seeing the movement laid out minute by minute, it really gives like a new weight. It did for me. I was like, yeah, wow. Then Coach Redeemus testified that he recovered 3 PNG thumbnail images from Kouri's phone. He described them as ghost or orphaned images. The original files have been deleted, in other words. So no, they're ghost or orphaned images. But thumbnail remnants did remain on the device. The things that remain, right? And the defense quickly objected to admitting the images. Judge Richard Mrazek overruled the objection and the images were admitted. And Coach Redeemus explained these were memes that had been accessed on her phone. The state displayed them for the jury. Let's take a look at those here. Let's see this. Do we have those? 1 second. I am trying to pull those up. I did want to look at them again with you guys. We've looked at them before. We'll try to get them. So I'll keep explaining what happened. Well, maybe we can pull them up. Because I think I do want to talk about those. Next, prosecutor Chernak switched from text and tower pings to something that felt even more chilling, which is web searches. So we'll try to pull those image PNGs up in just a second, but let's jump to web searches and we'll go back to those. He asked Coach Redeemus about internet searches conducted on Kouri's phone. I was like, okay. We've heard of some of them, right? We heard of some of them before this trial started. We heard of more in opening statements, right? So, internet searches, guys, conducted on Kouri's phone. Not good. They are not good. The jury heard a very long list today. Okay, so here's some of the things the searches included. Let me take a drink first. Kouri Richins Google searches, or I guess to clarify, searches found on Kouri's devices. So we can assume it's Kouri, but I guess they could argue it's not. Okay. Searches included, can you delete everything on an iCloud account? Another search. Can deleted text messages be retrieved? Another one. How to completely wipe an iPhone clear remotely. And what is FBI analysis of electronics? She asks. And then there were also searches that we've heard before, but they're so good. And here are the more. Utah prison, and Utah women's prison was another one. Oh, another one is, what are you allowed inside Utah jails? She wonders. And our favorite here at Hidden True Crime, luxury prisons for the rich in America. Here are some more searches though. Here, can cops force you to do a lie detector test? Just prepping for something. And another one. Can probable cause be testimony? There were searches about life insurance as well. Here we go. Will life insurance pay if death certificate is pending? That's a good question. And questions about how long it takes to receive life insurance money. Not that she wasn't money hungry. There were also searches about recovering data from deleted phones, whether police can see your messages, and articles about Utah's new prison. She was really into that, reading about that new prison in Utah. One search that stood out was her own name, Kouri Richins, Camas net worth. Camas is the city she's from. Kouri Richins, Camas. Make sure it's not the other Kouri Richins net worth. Like Kouri, I just have to ask, like, what was that murder documentary you were watching and texting your paramour about? Remember that was a text we learned about earlier, that she was texting her paramour, her side guy, and saying that she wishes she could just watch a murder documentary with him. I want to know, like, what murder documentary were you watching? What did you learn from that murder documentary? Because these Google searches are not a good look, especially if you're knowingly being investigated. I don't know if she learned that much. I don't know what documentary she was watching. I don't think she was listening to Hidden True Crime. Anyway, Coach Demas confirmed these were pulled from her phone data, though. And as a prosecutor methodically read through them, you could sort of feel the tone shift in the courtroom. It's like, it's one thing to hear about deleted texts. It's another to hear searches that appear to show someone wondering whether deleted data can be recovered or how prisons operate. You know, she's thinking about her future, her long-term goals, long-term plans. And of course, look, searches do not automatically mean intent. People Google weird kind of things all day. People Google some weird shit. But in the context of everything else the jury has heard today, the state is clearly trying to suggest a pattern. Curiosity about wiping devices, curiosity about jail and her future plans, curiosity about life insurance payouts. Shervanek finished and said he had no further questions. And before we get into cross, because this is going to keep going, I do want to take a second, though, to hear a quick word from our trial sponsor. All of you know I have been using this product for years. I love it. And a quick word from our trial sponsor, Beam Dream. All right, gems. Many people have been asking me for my secret formula or the perfect way to make dream. And although there's not any perfect way, I think I found the almost perfect way, if I'm going to be honest. It starts with hot water, as you can see there, and then you add a scoop of dream. Okay, a scoop and just a little bit more, especially when I need that extra help falling asleep. It does the job every time. I sleep so well and wake up feeling refreshed and ready to go in the mornings. And then I use the frother the Dream gave me on my first order. Everyone gets this on their first order. I use it more than just on Dream. It is now a staple in the kitchen. I love this. And then what I'm going to do is top my drink with some steamed oat milk. This is the secret, in my opinion. Just a perfect amount of creaminess, but nothing too extreme right before bed. Use a QR code or the link in the description of this episode for more information on Dream. We love this drink. It has done so much for our family. Thank you, Dream. Thank you, Dream. Where am I? Where am I? Hello, everybody. I'm Black. Let's see. Oh, there I am. Yes. Thank you to Dream, our sponsor. They have been incredible, and I love drinking my nightly drink every night. So, and they have little travel pouches, and they get me through trials, that's for sure. And Lily is demanding that I pet her right now. Look, I talk with my hands, Lily. So it's about Google searches. Like, I'm kind of hand friendly. Look, she's pushing. She's like, pet me. I got it. We'll get there. So, okay. So next up was the cross-examination with Ramos. And Ramos started by saying, let's just dive in right into the gist, the PNG files. I don't know if we ever were able to grab those, but that was my first cue, though, to like buckle up for a million corrects, right? The correct counter. Take a listen to this. Hold on one second.
Been marked as State's Exhibit 340. Do you recognize that?
Yes, sir.
Now, when you were testifying earlier, you informed the jury that it was all the image files that you received, correct?
Well, just for this representation is just for that, for the 4th.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. So what we're looking at are
It's part of
images-
that. Yes.
Images, data files for that day. Specifically, I think there was a range. It was for the March 4th, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, in that, there were 39 images, right?
Correct.
Now, of those images, obviously, we've seen 3 of them. Okay.
Yes.
So I want to focus on those. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up those 3 images that you've seen.
Okay.
Okay.
Mhm.
And I'm going to show you the MAC, right?
Okay.
Which is the modified access created.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Correct. Ramos brought up that there were 39 images from the March 4th date, but that only 3 images had been shown. Okay. So again, these were the images we saw earlier, you know, showing that like they're not a good look for Kouri at all. You know, money hungry images showing she's rich and that she's gonna, you know, enjoy the good life. Probably before she started Googling luxury prisons before that, you know, she thought maybe, you know, it showed motive. Okay. And one was a photo though, but they're saying, the defense is saying, hey, look, only 3 images were shown of all the images. Oh, Lily just sneezed too. 3 images were shown of all the images. And, but one is a photo of a property, and Coach Demas couldn't tell what property the house was. But, you know, it just that it was a property of sorts. And then Ramos then pulled out his phone and started doing a thought experiment, essentially. And this was actually, I thought he did a pretty good job. So Ramos unlocked his phone, saying he was going to send a text to his son, and it had 3 GIFs or GIFs, potato, 3 GIFs, photos, and a picture from his photos folder. And then Ramos asked Coach Demas if he got his phone extracted and analyzed it, would all of those be the same date and time down to the second? And Coach Demas responded that, yeah, they could be. And then Ramos asked where exactly the images from Kouri's phone were. And Coach Demas explained the images were in an SMS database. The system in Kouri's phone logged those images. And Coach Demas also said that there are things that are in our phones that we can't necessarily access. And in order to do so, one needs to process to go below the surface. That's where Cellbrite comes in, below the surface. Coach Demas confirmed that he provided the entire extraction report with all 39 images. And then Ramos shifted from extraction over to analysis. Coach Demas confirmed that Cellbrite is not infallible, and that Cellbrite recommends its operators to make sure the operators validate their data for lots of reasons, including making sure the hardware and the software is used is working. So let's take a look at this clip. One second.
A lot of money went into making those phones.
Yes.
A lot of the data and how it works is all of it's proprietary, correct?
Yes.
Now, in a way, Cellbrite is trying to hack the phone to get the information.
Doesn't really hack it, but it parses the data. in there.
It parses
But yeah,
the data.
Yeah.
Okay. And when it spits out, that's not a common term. When the report gives you this information, you can't take it as God's truth.
There's context to a lot of stuff. So yeah, I mean, I can take it as God's truth, quote unquote.
Yeah.
That is how the system files within the are constructed.
You can take it that that's how Cellbrite put the data or extracted the data. Correct. Now, you've heard, I suspect, of the epoch time.
Yes.
Okay. Now, if you could explain to the jury epoch time in terms of digital forensics.
I cannot.
Cannot.
No.
Why not?
I don't have enough familiarization with it. I just don't.
Okay.
Not on the stand.
All right. Well, is it fair to say that let's look at this created and modified and accessed, that date and time?
Okay.
Are you aware that that time isn't actually how it's stored on the phones?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Sure. So the epoch time, if you're not familiar with it, it's the number of seconds that has elapsed since January 1st, 1970. Are you familiar with that?
I am.
Oh, sorry,
For a
Judge.
minute.
I
What was the
apologize.
objection?
He said he couldn't testify about what epoch time is.
So
So
foundation,
foundation.
I think you're laying foundation.
I am,
right?
Judge.
Let's see where this goes. Overruled. If
So-
you would, I interrupted you, gentlemen, if you would ask that question.
Absolutely, Judge. So the epoch time, and I'm just gonna, I'll explain it how I know it, and if it refreshes your recollection, great. If not, we'll move on.
Okay.
Okay. So epoch time is the number of seconds that has elapsed since January 1st, 1970. Okay.
Yes.
Don't know why they did it this way, but that is how the phones have registered the information. Or were you aware of that?
Yes, and I don't know the technical aspects of it, but it's a programming reason.
Correct. And because we're not going to do the math together.
No, we're not.
We rely, or in this case, you were relying on Celebrite to do that.
Correct.
Correct. Now, you also, a way to validate your data, because things even as, little as time, you also have the ability to cross-reference the data that you have in your phone, in the Celebrite report, okay, the extraction, with other information, correct?
Correct.
So for example, the call logs, the text messages that you sent out, right? That's presented in the extraction.
Yes.
You could then compare it to the call detail records,
Correct.
right? And you
Yes.
could say, oh yeah, you know what? This matches up.
Yes.
Okay. And you do that in a way to make sure that the information you're getting is correct.
Yes.
Okay. Now, when we look at this 4 images, the 3, I'm going to call them the what's been admitted as the 3 PNGs, okay, which we all saw, or just call them GIFs, even though I know they're not right now.
Right.
But just so everybody's aware. And then we have this photo that appears to be of a home. Okay. Right. Now, you have records and you have call logs for March 4th, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you can see who all communicated that day.
Correct.
Correct. And you could also get that through call detail records, correct?
Not always.
But the call detail records you indicated mark the time that a call was sent out and a text was sent out.
If it hits the carrier. So if it's a Wi-Fi call or if it's like iMessage, like iPhone to iPhone, iMessaging,
Okay.
it can route around it and it won't hit the call detail record.
Perfect. So you had on March 4th at least some information in what you received from the extraction report that some calls were made, some text messages were sent from Miss Richins' phone.
Yes.
Okay. Now, with that information, you can, if you wanted to, you can attempt to see whether this image was sent or received by somebody, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You did not do that.
I did do that.
Okay. And who did it come back to?
I don't know. It was not available in the system file.
Okay.
Would you like, can I explain why?
Sure. Yeah, that'd be great.
Why I think based on,
Yeah.
there is, from the time this event occurred on March 4th till the time the phone was seized on April 13th,
Mhm.
I believe, 2022. There's an extended period of time that has passed in data terms. Okay. So the reason why going back to the source on this is challenging is if the text source of this, incoming or outgoing, is missing,
Mhm.
you can sometimes go into the data file, like from the timeline and from the extraction, you can go into the database information. You can go in there and you can look at that to see if that information is contained in the database still. The problem is that data is overwritten. Once it's deleted, the database then overwrites it. So then what happens is the source in there goes away. There's small amounts of data that are in there.
Like traces.
Well, like PNGs.
Yeah.
Okay. That are still there. But like I kind of explained with the data space, think of it as a.
Oh, 1 second. Is that like the garbage collection?
Yeah, we're talking
Yeah.
about that, right? So so deletions. So think of that as, think of that deletion file as like the trash can in your house, like in your kitchen. Okay.
Kouri always looks so stressed, I think more than she's looked in hearings during this trial. So we have the PNG images. I did want to show them. This is what we're talking about. These are 3 of the nearly 40 images found on her phone. So here you go. Idiots everywhere. I'm really rich. Wiping your nose with money is the Dumb and Dumber scenes, implying the motive, money. Okay, so there you go. That's what we're talking about. But they're saying, look, there's plenty of images, and how can you know? And just, poking holes. But then Ramos then wanted to move on to the web searches. And Coach Demas confirmed that a lot of those web searches have no dates. That's interesting. And then Ramos moved into context. Well, and in Ramos's thought experiment, I actually thought this was a pretty good thought experiment. He brought up a certain real housewife of Salt Lake City being sentenced in April of 2022. Didn't see this one coming up, but take a listen to this. Was not on my bingo card today. Here we go. Take a listen.
Okay. Did you perform any searches around the time on those that you can see on the web search, that you can see the date that they were searched? Okay. Did you do any searches on Google or any validation to see what, if anything, was relevant to what was being pulled up?
No, like, did I perform the searches myself? And
not the searches. So for example, are you familiar with a certain Real Housewife in Salt Lake City?
Recently?
Yeah. In
Yes.
April 2022?
Oh, no.
Okay. Are you aware of somebody maybe being sentenced around that time?
No.
Okay. And now that would provide context to you, correct?
I could.
Yeah. Because right now, just as we see the searches, we don't know why that would be a search, correct?
I don't know
Yeah.
content or can't speculate on anything.
You can't speculate.
No.
You shouldn't speculate.
No.
You also can't tell me with the information that you have who actually did the search.
Correct.
Right? It was done on the phone.
It was done on the device.
You could tell us the location of the phone possibly when those searches were done.
Correct.
You could tell us possibly the Wi-Fi that it was connected to, if it was connected to one.
Correct.
Okay. But you can't tell us who searched it.
Correct.
Now, you can't tell us if we were if this happened on the 4th. Let's go back to the GIF images, okay? On that day at that time, are you aware, were you told that there were other people in that home?
I'm aware of that.
You are aware of that?
Yes.
Okay, and so did you reach out to those, or I guess that's not your job. You could not tell us who opened that phone at that time, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, I do want to talk to you about something you just brought up. It was you said, the Wi-Fi. You said not necessarily because it could be an iMessage, right?
Correct.
Was one option, and then the other one was that it was connected or sent through Wi-Fi.
Yeah, the file path on here indicates that it is a mobile SMS, which went through iMessage, and iMessage iPhone to iPhone typically will not hit a carrier, so it won't be in a call detail.
Right. But that also is helpful to you, right? Because you're able to see of all the people that she could have possibly contacted that day, you could then narrow it to like who has an iPhone.
Correct.
And so because of the communication, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm guessing here, between iPhone and iPhone, it's a different connection, correct? It makes it easier to communicate?
It's a typical Wi-Fi connection, so it's not a different connection.
Okay.
It's just a different system, or it's the same. They're on the same system. It goes through Apple servers versus the carrier.
So for example, can we pull up the Mr. Richins mobile activity on the night of March 3rd? Do you recall that state's exhibit where you laid out a graph of all the text messages that were sent from Mr. Richins to a Pedro Sonora?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I think it's up on your screen now.
Yes.
Okay. When we were talking about this, one of the last questions was about the text from Raul at 10:18.
Okay.
And I believe Ms. Shervanack asked if it had been read, or if you could tell if it had been read, and you answered it very curiously, which is, I'm left to wonder, I just want clarification, whether or not you could actually tell if it was read, or whether there just wasn't enough data to determine whether it had been read.
I didn't see any. I don't remember.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
fair.
I just don't remember the
No,
data line
and that's why I'm
specifically.
following up.
Yeah.
That's why I'm following
Yeah.
up.
There's no response. The indication was that it was not read.
Now, here we see all these text messages, correct?
Yes.
And we just talked about the iMessage that you just discussed. That
Yes.
sometimes that won't register on call detail records, for example, right?
Correct.
Now that's different than this, right?
That is different than this.
Okay. You would expect an iMessage to show up here?
Yes, because this is from the phone's timeline itself.
Correct.
These are system file.
Correct. Just want to make sure.
Wow. I'm going to read some of your comments there. First off, I love that one where someone said, like, watching them pass corrects is like watching a ping pong match. The corrects, it's painful. It's painful. Thank you again to Mrs. Martin for keeping the correct counter going. It's like mind blowing. So somebody asked, Robin asked, where are the searches with Jen Shaw's name in it? Yes, Jen Shaw is the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City person they brought up. Grayson says that Mr. Correct needs to brush up on his facts. Jen Shaw was arrested in March of 2021, pleaded guilty in July of 2022, and sentenced in January of 2023. So why would these searches be relevant? And then people pointed out that they're also sort of implying that, like, look, it could have been your kids making these searches. How do we know? And so someone said, yeah, blame it on the only other people with him at the time, your kids. Yeah, there's Krista saying the correct between these two are like watching a ping pong match. And someone saying, are you kidding me? The kids made those searches. So, and then Tracy says, so they're trying to make it seem like because of the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, that's why she might have been searching that, but then says you can't prove who searched for it. Which one is it, Ramos, right? In other words, he's just trying to confuse the jury, I'm sure. Jana Lee explains who Jen Shaw is. Yes, not everyone watches Real Housewives. Yes, he is talking about Jen Shaw. She was a Salt Lake City housewife that committed fraud. Her husband was a coach at the University of Utah. And Mrs. Martin states, yeah, I'm going to assume as a mom of 4, 3 boys, specifically then at 9, 7, and 5, then making the searches incredibly doubtful. Agree. Great thoughts from all of you. You know, it honestly, all I could say was like, all I could think of was like, poor Jen Shaw for being brought up in court over this. That was, like you said, not what I was expecting. Jen Shaw was arrested for financial crime. So yeah, maybe the searches Kouri did about FBI investigations could be passed off for Kouri's alleged interest in Jen Shaw. Never heard about that before, but you know, okay. Let's say that Ramos has a point with his thought experiment there. But as for the fentanyl and death certificate searches, I'm going to say that those can't be tied back to Jen's case as easily, right? But hey, to acknowledge, I do want to say, to acknowledge the defense's argument and participate in their thought experiment and see if it could indeed bring in reasonable doubt. I agree. Context is everything. And people Google weird stuff, especially if they're in true crime, right? There's some weird stuff people Google. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go find out what my Google searches are from just since this morning. I thought, you know what? Let's practice this thought experiment with the defense. Real time. Dead serious. I pulled up every single Google search of mine since this morning. Here's what they are. Full disclosure. Squatty Potty Duke. There's a reason, and it's not what you think. Neil, Daniel, and Jeffrey Harmon. That was one Google search. Angel Studios. They're the ones that made Sound of Freedom, by the way. Who made the Squatty Potty commercial was another question. I had a lot of questions this morning. Jeanette McCurdy was another Google search of mine. And then Daphne of Scooby-Doo, because Grayson mentioned that I looked like Velma. And I was like, no, I think it's Daphne. But either way, both of them are the OG true crime sleuths. So yes, this is my Daphne Scooby-Doo shirt today. Those measly those kids got into everything and solved a lot of crimes. So the original true crime sleuths, Scooby-Doo. Okay, so and then Philip Lum Dream Patchwork Pull-On Jeans sale, because I like them and they're way too expensive full price. So I'm waiting patiently for my patchwork pull-on jeans. All right. Well, there you go. Full disclosure. Everything I've Googled today. So what do we learn from that? You know what I didn't Google? I didn't Google how to delete my search history or wipe data. I did not search, can you delete everything on an iCloud account? No, not on my history. You know, I wonder, maybe I've once upon a time deleted search that I don't know about. Can deleted text messages be retrieved? I've probably Googled something like that. I don't know when, I don't remember, but like if I'm, missed a text, deleted a text I wish I hadn't, probably Googled that, fair, maybe. But at the same time, I wasn't under investigation for murder. And rather, I was probably just wanting to know some stuff. I did not Google how to completely wipe an iPhone clear remotely and what is FBI analysis of electronics. No, none of those on my Google search. Anyway, point taken, carry on. There you go. With cross and just so you guys know, I am researching. I do not use Squatty Potty, but there was a reason for that. Nonetheless, moving on. Ramos then brought up the movement. Not that there's anything wrong with that if you do, but Ramos brought up the movement of the iPhone. Coach Demas had done an analysis with the overall use in terms of activity on Eric's Apple Watch. And there was an 87-minute gap on February 14th, 2022, that Coach Demas said was atypical. So Coach Demas said that he came to that conclusion by doing random spot chats on random activity in Eric's devices and looking at large types of movement. Coach Demas said that there were periods of inactivity on Eric's devices, but not in that context that the 87 minutes was in. Coach Demas said he did spot checks throughout the 20 different days and made a mental note of it. And while Coach Demas agreed that he was speculating on the stand, he did say that in the topic of context, Eric had texted Kouri he was going to take a nap. So he figured he was taking a nap, which was atypical with Eric's regular activity. Ramos focused next on validating the activity sensor data for Kouri and Eric's devices. Because if you remember, we listened to that. They said the Cellbrite isn't always reliable, that you need to probably best validate it, right? So Ramos asked for the validating activity. Ramos wanted to start with the distance traveled. And what did Coach Demas say? That he did not validate them because the information was just given to him, which that's interesting. Okay, so after all that talk of it's best to validate, he's saying he didn't. Information was just given to him. Then we looked at yet another graph. Take a listen.
So let's look at that 3:08:10 a.m. Okay. Now, the 74.14 meters, that comes straight from the extraction report, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And the 243 feet, I imagine that's something that you converted?
Yes.
Okay. And using what?
Just a Google conversion.
Google conversion.
Yeah.
Okay. And in this device travels, we know that it was 74.14 meters that was registered on the device.
Correct.
Okay. Now, what kind of iPhone was this?
I believe it was an iPhone 12.
Okay. And do you recall what iOS system it had?
I do not.
Okay. Now, Did you, for example, going back to, so I can explain myself, did you grab your phone, a phone, and measure the distance from point X to point Y, put the phone in your pocket, walk over there, knowing the distance, walk back, plug in the phone, and see whether the Celebrite data that you received for what you just did in that controlled environment matched what was being produced?
No.
Okay. Did you purchase or have access to the iPhone make and model of Ms. Richins?
No.
On either of her phones that she had?
No.
Did you have access to Mr. Richins' iPhone make or model?
No.
Okay. And you did not do any tests, correct?
Correct.
So these numbers right here that we're seeing, you are speculating that is correct.
I'm not speculating. I'm relying on the data being correct inside the device.
But you have no way of knowing that.
Well, I mean, the examples you're giving are not 100%, wouldn't 100% verify this anyway, I don't think. I think you would have to use the exact device under the exact conditions.
Yeah.
And in any way, for one.
Yeah, so let's go with that. So
and two, and
hold on
which
real
I
quick.
didn't do,
and
right, which I didn't do.
Real quick, go on. So let's be clear. We understand you didn't do it. You did have access or could gain access to the environment, correct?
I could.
Okay,
Yes.
so then let's go from there. There are body cams in this case. Were you aware of that?
Yes.
Okay. Have you been to the Richins home?
No.
Okay. Have you seen those body cams?
I've seen some images of the body cams. Yeah.
Okay. Have you seen videos of the body cams?
Very few.
Okay. Do you recall a video where one of Miss Richins' phones is handed from one of the EMS to an officer, and then the officer walks over all the way to where Miss Richins is to provide her the phone?
No.
Okay. Had you been aware of that, or had that, rather, I'll be fair to you, had that been told to you by the prosecutors or law enforcement? Having that controlled environment, having this data, having access to the same phone, downloading the same iOS, could you have run a test to see if it was similar? And specifically referring to the 41 meters that's indicated there.
I could.
Okay.
But I mean, your statement just actually opened up why there's a device movement later on.
It tends a question sometimes.
I agree. I took his giggles as confidence too. So Ramos then asked Coach Redemus if he knows about narcotics from his former law enforcement background and how most people dealing with drugs may want to delete their texts. Coach Redemus was aware that yes, people do in fact want to delete their texts. And then Ramos asked about the calls to the IRS made a month before tax season. Given the timeline and context of it being close to tax season, Coach Redemus agreed that the call to the IRS would not necessarily be unusual. Ramos then shifted to GPS data from the PowerPoints that had been shown earlier, showing Carmen's GPS data and the communications Carmen was having with Kouri at that time. And on the stand, Coach Redemus said he believed he was asked to look to see if Carmen had ever gone to the small Midway house, but the data is not that specific. It's not specific GPS location, it's tower pings. In other words, when you're getting tower pings, it's a broad tower. It's in the area of the house, but it's not specific GPS. Like I see that like with my ear pods at the house in that bedroom, right? So it's not specific GPS location, it's tower pings. Anyway, then Ramos shifted to biometric data. He asked Coach Redemus if he ever went anywhere in the extraction to see where Kouri put in her weight or height, and Coach Redemus did not remember doing that for either Kouri or Eric. Ramos then asked Coach Redemus if Coach Redemus had done anything to check the settings on Kouri's phone, and Coach Redemus said he had not. The prosecution had a quick redirect to set everything straight. Take a listen to this.
I want to follow up with you on. We talked a little bit about CDR data and Wi-Fi, maybe why things wouldn't show up on Wi-Fi.
Sure.
What type of messaging can happen over Wi-Fi?
Most app messaging happens over Wi-Fi. So third-party apps like WhatsApp, Kik, Signal, those types of apps. But also, again, iMessage.
And so when talking about those 3 image files located on Ms. Richins' phone from March 4th, 2022 at 8:29 a.m., we don't know all of the information about those because it was deleted.
Correct.
If it hadn't been deleted, we'd know more.
We might.
Talking about the web searches on the blue phone, when you looked through and analyzed that blue phone, nothing indicated to you that that blue phone was being used by someone else.
Correct.
I want to talk about Exhibit 3-14D. And this is the device, Scott, if we could put that one up.
One moment, please. The witness has it. Do you want to publish it?
Please.
Okay. Go ahead.
Now you made this exhibit in conjunction with the context of what was happening during this time frame. Is that correct?
Correct.
Meaning that you looked at messages between Kouri Richins and Eric Richins during this time frame.
Yes.
And in those messages, Kouri Richins was telling Eric Richins to go take a nap.
Yes.
And based on what you've created with this exhibit, does this movement in context indicate to you that during this time frame, Mr. Richins could have been laying down or
Yes.
not moving?
Yes.
I want to talk about this activity sensor data. That data is proprietary to Apple.
Yes.
And tell me if I'm wrong, but Apple probably puts a lot of money into making that data.
I'm sure they do.
They want it to be correct for
Yes.
their users,
Yes.
and they would want it to be accurate for their users
Yes.
because their users want that activity data to reflect what they're actually doing.
Yes.
Have you looked at activity data in other phone downloads that you've analyzed?
Yes.
And looking at phone activity data for other hundreds, maybe thousands of phones that you've analyzed, have you been able to tell if that data can be checked in other cases? Meaning that if somebody said, hey, I went for a 1 mile walk today, giving you a hypothetical, and then you could look at their phone and say that they went for a 1 mile walk. Have you been able to look at that type of data in other phones and verify that it reports in the way you would expect?
Are you asking about corroborating witness statements based on their activity in their devices?
Right.
Yes.
That activity data in other cases when you've analyzed it has been accurate and corroborated by other information.
In my experience, yes.
All right. So then, so Ramos then came back up for one more final attempt. I just found this exchange so interesting, how they're trying to sort of minimize cell data, cell data, which, I get it, they have to do, but it's difficult. Cell data doesn't lie. I guess it's not infallible, right? But okay, so Ramos comes back up for one more final attempt. Take a listen to this.
Indicated that the Ms. Sherbanek was talking about the information that was deleted.
Yes.
Regarding those thumbnails, GIFs, correct?
Yes.
Certainly, it would have been better for all of us.
It would have.
Does that file path and the information tell you who deleted it?
No.
And as you explained with the garbage collection, it could have been that way, correct?
It would have to be, it would have, if it wasn't deleted from the device, it would not have ended up there. There would be a remnant of it.
Right.
Yeah, it would be a data line.
Okay. Now, you were also asked about that you did not investigate or you don't have any reason to believe that anybody else had the blue iPhone. Do you recall that question?
Yes.
And you said that no.
Yes.
How do you come to that conclusion?
The big thing for me is there is a text in that phone from that device to Mr. Grossman in which the defendant indicates that.
So to be clear,
yes,
I'm not saying that the phone wasn't Miss Richins.
right.
Right.
Yeah.
My question is,
okay, well, I'm
You
trying
in-
to answer it.
yeah, so I'll clarify my question to make sure I'm
Okay.
I'm asking it right.
All right.
Is your testimony that there was nobody else who had access to that phone at all?
I don't know that.
Okay, that's my question. Now, you were asked about Apple software and proprietary software, and did you attempt to get information from anywhere else, whether it's Apple, whether it's another peer, whether it's another case, where you can get the information that you have in these extractions to validate it?
Kind of don't understand that
Sure,
question.
I'll
And-
rephrase.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
So I understand that you don't work for Apple,
No, I don't.
that you don't know how it works.
Uh,
That you, sorry,
Well,
that
I
you don't
mean-
know how the activity sensor data is logged, correct?
I don't know what their programming looks like.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you make any efforts in this case with this information to try to validate that the information you had was up to Apple standards?
No.
You indicated that you've been able to rely on other cases before. How many cases?
At least 100.
And so in those cases with activity sensor data, in those you did test?
Oh, okay. So analyze data in phones, at least 100 phones. There
Oh.
have probably been, I apologize, there have probably been a dozen or so cases where I've had to corroborate like witness statements and suspect statements, that type of thing, against their phones. And I have not found any inaccuracies.
I misunderstood. You, in those cases, corroborated the data that you received, but you did not run tests to make sure that the data you had was accurate.
Not physical tests, no, sir.
Correct. Okay. That's all I have to know.
Honestly, the corrects, they kill me. The prosecution then came up once more, and asked about that text from the blue phone and what indicated that it was Kouri herself that sent the text. So who are we going to blame this time? Coach Adema said that Kouri had essentially told Josh Grossman over text that she had activated one of her mom's phones and would be using that phone now. So that's how they know. And with that, Coach Redemus was done on the stand, but possibly not for good, as he is subject to rebuttal, of course. And like I said, people are asking in chat, I love that. What were trials like before cell data? Remember, as that people say, cell phones now tell our entire life history. The jury was then released, and Judge Mrazek noted that tomorrow morning they will talk about the juror issue with Molly and decide whether to voir dire the juror. In other words, ask more questions to decide whether or not to release this juror, the defense's requested release, or how they want to handle that, figure out how well she knows, or they, I don't know if it's a they, male or a female, but how well they know Molly. Anyway, as you know, I do want to point this out. Oh, and people are asking, I see there's still talk about today's Google searches. So let's give them all context, because that's the thought experiment, right? If you give them context, there is a crime I'm covering, an episode I'm writing, which is why I was Googling the earlier stuff. And then I am reading Jeanette McCurdy's memoir, and I'm a little old for iCarly, so I never watched it, and I wanted to try to understand more who she was. It's a really well written memoir, And then all the other the pants, I'm waiting for a sale. And then all those other searches were for an episode I'm working on. So there you go. There you go. Yeah. And they were not my son's searches. They were on my phone. So there you go. Yeah. A few of your comments before we take off. It's been a long live, so I know it's time to head, but I do want to share a few pinned comments or start comments. This is a great question. Does anyone know if Kouri recorded that call with Dr. Christensen? Because he said he isn't sure how that call was recorded. Or were they tapping her phone at the time? So in other words, he wasn't the one recording it. Was it Kouri recording it, or were they tapping his phone? That's actually a really, really, really great question. This one too is unlocking the phone and walking around for 15 minutes before calling 911 is not a great look, even if the distance walked isn't precise. Agree. That's I think what the jurors will take, right? If the distance walked isn't precise, who cares? Talk about semantics. Is that really what matters here? No, what matters is that you're unlocking your phone and walking around for 15 minutes before calling 911, and it's not a good look. Angela, this is one you said, oh my goodness, my cell phone data tells my entire life story. I think someone else said, can you imagine what trials would be like without cell phone data? Couldn't tell you. Yeah, and here's Krista saying, it's just so wild to think about trials before we had cell phones. Yeah. And Robin's making a good point. He is reporting what the phone says happened, not what actually happened. That's true. It's what the phone is saying happened. And so they're able to, put in some ideas about maybe it wasn't Kouri, maybe it was somebody else. Maybe she was really into Real Housewives of Salt Lake City and just waiting, right? Just waiting. Waiting for all this information about her favorite Real Housewives star. I mean, what a stretch. I think that's what we call a stretch. It was really odd. It was really odd. All right. Yeah, I wait for sale pants. Exactly. You Google them every so often. You'll find them. Just patience is key. Right. What an absolutely fascinating day, Mrs. Martin is saying. I want to give a big thanks to our moderators. These lives can't be possible without all of you. I know that we, honestly, we do these lives kind of like we might be late, we might be early. You never know when we're going to finish it. It's a big job every day. Troublemaker Baker has been helping us to live stream. Mrs. Martin is doing the painful job of correct counting. What a legend you are. And our moderators are just incredible. They show up. Thank you. And hit subscribe, hit notifications. Thank you for supporting our work. That's what makes this possible. If you value our work here at Hidden True Crime, please hit subscribe and hit notifications. There were so many kind people today gifting memberships. That was so nice. As they said, it was like raining memberships out there. Thank you. Someone mentioned that they could only afford giving one membership. We gave some memberships. Don't feel like you have to. The greatest gift you can give us if you want to support our channel, honestly, it is free. It's subscribing. It's hitting notifications. It's maybe leaving a comment and engaging and being here. So thank you. We do have some other things in the works. There's a lot of true crime cases going on that we really care about right now. We're a small team and we are trying to cover all of them. So thank you to those in chat that keep us updated and all these other cases that are happening right now. Monkey Vaughn is one of them. Stacy Wondra in Idaho. His Monkey Vaughn, Michael Vaughn's mother showed up today, Brandy. And there's so much. The Nancy Guthrie's case is still going on. And of course, the other episode I'm writing that you guys will know soon. So thank you. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for being here. And yeah, that's it. I guess that's it. I've heard also that we need an ending. We need an ending so that you guys can all chat after I click end. So we don't have that yet. We're working on it. So chat, do your little chats because I'm going to end. This is your countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And this will redirect to our live tomorrow, to our live feed. Come join us in the live feed as we continue to watch this trial, get caught up with our playlist. We'll have the link to our full playlist in the description of this episode, as well as pinned comments. And you can also find it. You can also listen to our full playlist on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you. All right. We'll see you guys. Bye.